Hello, my name is Chalimar Alvarado, and I will be presenting the crisis of the Colgan Air Flight 3407 in behalf of my group with Tyler Losey, Janexi Reyes, and McKenna Smith. Before we explain what exactly happened for the crisis of 3407, we would like to show you a simulation of what happened on that night. As you can see, Flight 3407 was clearly a tragedy. I'll first start off with what happened. On February 12, 2009, the Colgan Air Flight 3407 was scheduled to fly from New York, New Jersey to Buffalo, New York, when it crashed into a residential area in the town of Clarence, New York. Around 4 a.m., the plane's nose made a direct hit into the residential area, killing 50 people in total, with none of the plane's passengers and crew surviving. The crash of Colgan Air Flight 3407 is one of America's most overlooked plane crashes disasters. This crash helped shape the commercial airline industry greatly, creating new regulations for pilot license hours prior to operating the aircraft and much more. You might be wondering, what is Colgan Air? Well, Colgan Air was founded in 1965 by Charles Colgan. It started as a small business refueling and servicing aircrafts for the first 5 years before accumulating their own aircrafts to fly. Colgan Air piloted their first flight in 1970 from a small airport in Manses, Washington, to Poughkeepsie, New York. In July of 1997, Colgan Air signed a contract with Continental Airlines, where they were branded with the Continental Airlines brand and flew for them. 12 years later came the most fatal crash in the company's history, although it was not the first. On August 26, 2003, a U.S. Airways Express flight flown by Colgan pilots crashed near Cape Cod. Only the two pilots flying the aircraft were killed upon impact, as they were not carrying any passengers. Then in 2009 came the crisis of Flight 3407. The crisis response to the crash of Flight 3407 is an example of the discourse of renewal theory. The discourse of renewal theory focuses on an organization's ability to rebuild, learn, and seize opportunities that come from a crisis. The theory asserts that crises have the potential for positive reaction because of the opportunities within the crisis. This case exemplifies this theory and the dichotomy of the organizations involved. Two main points we would like to touch on are managing uncertainty effectively and responsibility with accountability. Managing uncertainty is perceiving a threat, a surprise event, and getting a response out in a short amount of time. Colgan Air failed to manage uncertainty with their main stakeholders, their employees. With strained employee relations and a quick release of information to place blame on Captain Marvin Renslow and co-pilot Rebecca Lynn Shaw, Colgan Air further strained their employee relations. While Colgan Air took to several communication channels and media outlets to provide updates and information on the crisis, they never took on full responsibility. The Erie County government handled the release of information regarding the crash very well. They set up a press conference within 45 minutes of the crash and consistently released updates and information. For responsibility and accountability, the Erie County government were prepared to take in the crisis. They held themselves accountable to clean and rebuild their community during and after the crisis occurred. Meanwhile, Colgan Air issued a lengthy press release that detailed most of the errors that contributed to the crisis, yet never took responsibility or held themselves accountable for the crisis. Both organizations had strengths in this crisis. The Erie County government had prepared their employees with stimulations and trainings on different types of crisis. This ensured that people knew what the roles were once a crisis actually hit. Everybody knew what to do, which created less chaos and a quick and effective response. The team also responded with one clear voice, meaning they had consistent messages surrounding all the different government departments involved. This prevented misinformation from spreading. Both Colgan Air and Erie County government were available and communicated openly and honest with the media and public. The Erie County government set up a press conference within 45 minutes of the crash and consistently released updates. They answered every question for the media, never said no comment, and if they didn't know something, they responded with something along the lines of, "I don't know, but I will find out for you." Colgan Air reached a wider audience by using different communication channels. They utilized social media, television, and even face-to-face communication so that their messages could reach different audiences. Colgan Air also continuously updated their website with news media releases and also included a list of frequently asked questions and a Q&A regarding the crisis. Despite their many strengths, there were also weaknesses before and during the crisis. Before the crisis occurred, Colgan Air employee relations were strained as many employees were paid low wages, had very long commutes, and often suffered from fatigue. Such is the case with the Captain Marvin Renslow and co-pilot Rebecca Line Shaw. Renslow departed on a 3-day trip from Florida to Newark in order to captain Flight 3407. Similarly, Shaw had departed on a day-long journey to be his co-pilot. At this point, both were suffering from long commutes and heavy fatigue. It was also found out that Marvin Renslow had failed 3 flight tests before he took off on Flight 3407. During the crisis, Colgan Air never took responsibility for what happened. While they did acknowledge that the tragedy and communicated openly and honest with the stakeholders, Colgan Air never accepted their true role in the crisis. But not taking on their true role, Colgan Air did not fully develop the discourse of renewal theory. By solely focusing on the crisis that they were presented at the time, Colgan Air neglected to seize opportunities during and after the crisis that would lead to positive communication with stakeholders. On the other hand, Erie County government is not without fault either. They did not work with Colgan Air directly, only working with media and county citizens. This is a weakness for both organizations, as working together at the beginning of the crisis would not have cost each organization less time, money, and effort. Sharing resources between the organizations involved in a crisis can help speed up the renewal process. Overall, our team came up with a couple of recommendations for both Colgan Air and Erie County government. Colgan Air should have made a formal statement, either through a press release or a conference, in which they accepted responsibility for the crisis. After responsibility would have been taken, then Colgan Air could begin the renewal process. In doing so, Colgan Air would have offered assistance in resolving this crisis to the Erie County government. For example, the county was responsible for cleaning up the crash and rebuilding the site. Colgan Air could have assisted in that effort. Colgan Air should have communicated with stakeholders post-crisis. Colgan Air did eventually change their pilot training program and the minimum number of flight hours required from employment, yet Colgan Air should have communicated these policy changes to stakeholders to inspire trust in the organization once more. Instead, over a couple of years, they fizzled out their operations until they ceased all operations in 2012. Now, our recommendations for the Erie County government are as follows. Had the Erie County government reached out to Colgan Air at the start of the crisis, both organizations could have worked together to resolve it. With both organizations working to resolve the crisis, both could have benefited from a quicker renewal. The Erie County government wouldn't have had to spend as much money, time, and efforts in cleanup if they had communicated directly with Colgan Air to get assistance in rebuilding and reestablishing trust in their community. Thank you so much for watching. Our group really enjoyed analyzing and learning from the crisis of Flight 3407, and we were excited to present this to you. We have all enjoyed our time in class this semester and can't wait to put all that we have learned about crisis communications into our prospective careers. Thank you so much.